Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. What is up? Welcome back to Big Fat 5, a podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum. This week's guest is, well, me. I've been getting a lot of questions from new listeners regarding my time in LA and asking for any sort of advice on how to make strides in their drumming career. And while I certainly don't think I am an authority on that matter, I still welcome these conversations. That being said, I wanted to upload this episode as a good reference for what I tend to say time and time again. I also acknowledge that my favorite podcasts are my favorite podcasts because I feel like I know the host. And while I keep these conversations pretty casual, I don't really talk about myself and my history too much. So a few months back, I had Ryan Seaman on the show. And by the way, I love that episode. Please go check it out on this feed. But Ryan has his own show on Adobe Radio called Ryan Seaman and Friends. So when we recorded this, I want to say back in October of 2022, it was a day off for me on tour, and we both had enough time to do back-to-back interviews. So right after he was on my show, I hopped on his show to talk about my story as a drummer and offer some advice of varying credibility. So I hope you enjoy getting to know me a little bit better, and we'll be back with our regularly scheduled programming soon, I promise. Also, please email me at ben@bigfatsnaredrum.com at any time to offer suggestions for the show, like comments, concerns, guest recommendations, congratulations on being your favorite podcast, whatever you want. I've had some really nice people reach out as of late, and it truly means the world. You know who you are. Thank you. I don't take any of it for granted. Anyways, enough about me. Here's an episode all about me. Cheers.
Okay, we're back with another episode of Ryan Seaman and Friends, and I gotta say, we were testing out the quality of the sound on this week's episode, and it sounds like he's like right next to me, but he's not. He's like in North Carolina, I believe, and by the time this comes out, he will. And by the time this comes out, he will not be anywhere near there, and maybe he'll be back home in Los Angeles. But this week, I have drummer Ben Hilsinger from the band Eve 6 and Cannons. Ben, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on my show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, dude. I'm stoked, man.
Yeah, I know we've been trying to do this for a little bit, but our schedules have been, conflicting because we're both touring drummers, so it happens like that. So, well, Ben, so the reason why I wanted to have this show is because it gets me to know just people that I've come in contact with in music better, or they could be like an actor, or they could be like just anything that has some sort of successful merit behind them. And I just want to know like how they get from like point A to point B, because I feel like we all kind of have like similar stories, but it's really nice to know the people I'm talking to's story, so I get to know my friends better, get to know people that I've been around in music. So
amen to that, dude.
Yeah. Well, Ben, so take me from like, I don't want to say like the very beginning, not like the inception of Ben, but I mean like, take me
when
to...
a mommy and a daddy love each other very much.
Yeah, exactly. Take me to like when did you start playing? Like, where did you grow up? How did this all start for you?
Well, so my dad's a drummer.
Okay.
I grew up in Washington State, basically Canada, north of Spokane, Washington, like a podunk town of like 1,000 people. Uh-huh. And I was lucky that we didn't have that many people in my town because I was like the only drummer. So I was the one that got to play on the drum set in pep band. I was the first chair in jazz band. I had all the cool snare parts in like concert band, And so I was just like, that was my identity from the second that there was a chance to have that as an identity. And so, because there's so many friends growing up that were way better drummers than me, but they were in like a school with like 5,000 people. So they weren't able to actually get the practice. So was always a drummer. when I graduated high school, I was actually going to be an occupational therapist because my sister has some special needs, and we were really close, and I just wanted to do that. She had some complications when she was younger, so that was going to be my life path. And then I just kept playing in local bands and decided to not go to the next quarter of college and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and then I ended up actually going to school for winemaking for a few years in Seattle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In my 20s. Totally was not really playing drums that much after being in those local bands for a few years. Toured a little bit. Band called If You're Lucky, band called Rental 58.
Okay.
They're on Spotify, but I mean, they're just, shitty little local bands. Oh, by the way, can I cuss on here?
Yes,
you asked me about my...
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So for those that don't know, I was on Ben's show, not that long ago. I don't know when that's coming out either, but I was just on your show. So we're just kind of doing this like back-to-back thing where like I'm on his show and then he's on my show.
Well, mine is coming out. The one with you on is coming out like a day after we record it. So I'm not sure when this is coming out, but probably months ago.
Okay.
You've been live on my feed for a while now.
That's great.
But yeah, so I moved to Seattle from Spokane area in like 2013-ish. I went to school for wine.
Yeah.
And then we didn't really talk about it on my podcast, but so Mike Carrera, a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
When I was over there going to school for wine, we had a friend, his name is Levi. He had recorded with Mike at Monkey Trench way back in the day, and Mike had reached out to him saying, hey, at this point, I think it's pretty much public knowledge, but Yuri had kind of stepped away from MXPX for a little bit. And so Mike was just trying to stay busy in the studio. Didn't really know what it was going to be, but he was just looking for anyone to kind of come play with. And so I went over there a few times and we just messed around a little bit. And it was one time where it was like getting late and I had to go take the ferry back from Bremerton to get to school. And I was just like, at that point, I'd walked away from music for a little bit, and I had the dilemma of like staying in this situation, at least for just that day, to hang out with Mike. And we were like writing this fun song, or go to school for wine. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm in my mid-20s. I love playing drums. Why am I walking away from music? I can always go to school for wine. So I'll actually, me and the Mike thing never really came to fruition of any record or anything like that, because I ended up moving to LA. I will always thank Mike Herrera for, whether he knows it or not, the reason that I quit school and decided to get back into music.
Wow.
And so, yeah, love Mike. He's always going to be a big part of my life. So anyways, yeah, after that kind of fizzled, because then Yuri came back to the band. As everyone knows, MXPX still plays live shows. I started playing with more Seattle bands, and we ended up moving. Well, there's a band called Ever So Android. In 2016, I moved down to LA from Seattle with that band. Played with them for about a year, and then I just really enjoyed playing with a million other people. Not that I didn't love playing with them, but I liked being that chameleon and meeting people and doing the whole LA freelance drummer thing. And so they basically, it was a two-piece, and they decided, we want a drummer who is just obsessed with us. It's ride or die for just our band, which I'm still great friends with them. We actually have dinner quite a bit. And so it was a mutual parting. But at that point, that's when I started to just play around town a lot in LA and had to pay my dues that way.
Right.
And so I was working at this restaurant called La Poubelle, which is in Hollywood. It's kind of a place to be seen where comedians and musicians go. It's like this old, I don't want to say trashy, but dive bar French restaurant.
Yeah.
I mean, La Poubelle literally means the trash can. But I met this guy while I was serving.
Yeah.
I will keep his name nameless.
Okay.
But he had wanted me to play with him. He heard I was a drummer, and he would always come in 3 sheets to the wind. And so I was always like, he's a good guy, but I was always like, man, you're always like so drunk when you come in. So I kind of avoided
that man, ladies and gentlemen, was named Fred Durst. He, no, I'm just kidding.
It's Fred.
I'm just kidding.
He wanted me to play at his jazz night.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's okay. So you get the joke. Okay, good. I'm just playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a fucking jazz night. I didn't even know that for like the longest time. He had a jazz night at Black Rabbit
insane.
Rose.
He is a man.
For sure.
Yep.
Okay. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to
I love me some Fred. No, that was a good deviation.
All right.
So I finally ended up playing with this guy, and he had an amazing voice, and we decided to record a demo. And so there's this guy named Kenny Carkeet, who maybe you know Kenny.
I don't.
He was one of the original members in AWOL Nation. One of my favorite people, and also someone who I wouldn't be anywhere where I am today without Kenny. But Kenny had done like kind of a barter system with this guy, where this guy was allowing Kenny to use his practice space for a live show they were doing. And then in return, Kenny was going to let him come to his studio in Santa Monica at the time, and Kenny was going to produce the session. And so that was the session that we were going to go and Kenny was going to produce. So we go in there and the song was cool. The session went well, but me and Kenny, just producer, drummer, we just clicked. He would just like, well, try this. And you know how it goes. Sometimes it's just like musically you're like on the same wavelength. And so after that session, I had DM'd Kenny on Instagram. This is again back in like 2017. And I was like, hey man, if you ever need any, at this point, he had just left AWOL Nation. So he was like he's the coolest guy in the world. And I was like, if you ever need a drummer for another session, like as you do, you follow up with people. It's a business. And then a month later, he was in this band, or he was in a band called Fitness. And the lead singer in that band was Max Collins from Eve 6.
Right.
And so he called me up and said, hey, the drummer that we're currently playing with isn't working out. Would you want to come play this Vegas show with us, just to have fun? Of course, I said yes. And then that started a 3.5-year history with Fitness. And then when Tony, the original drummer for Eve 6, left in 2018, Max asked me to join Eve 6, and I've been with them for 4+ years now. And then John, who is the guitarist in Eve 6, is the manager for the band I'm currently on tour with, Cannons.
That's crazy. Okay.
And so, when they were looking for a live drummer, because they had toured with, co-headlined a tour maybe 3 years ago with me in a band called Party Nails, and they killed it. Paul, the now keyboardist live and bassist live, who, if you're looking, he's actually behind me right now. So I can't talk. I got to say only nice things.
Right.
This is the edited version. No. But no, when they were looking for a drummer, because Paul is a great drummer, but he plays bass and keys and whatnot. And so they needed a drummer about maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I got the call, and then they've just blown up. They're on Columbia now. And while Eve 6, I'm not a member of Cannons. I am a member of Eve 6. Cannons has definitely become my full-time gig. They are hitting the ground running. This is our 4th full U.S. tour in less than 11 months.
Wow.
So we're just out here doing our thing, but still play with other people around town, but I'm rarely in town to do it. So right now, Cannons is my main gig. But it all stemmed from that session I said yes to with Kenny Carkey. So that's, I guess, the truncated version of where I am today.
Okay, so that was really well put, man. All right, and we are out of time. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, thank you.
No, you did that. I got to be honest. You did that so great that I have tons of questions. Just how so. Okay,
awesome.
Well, first off, I need to go. I wanted to let you finish your entire story, but what made you interested in wine?
That's a great question, and I guess I would say when I had one of those bands, Rental 58, I had been in a town called Corvallis, Oregon, which is just a little bit south of Portland, Oregon. Okay. That's where kind of our home base was. And, it's in my early 20s. So I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. And I was like, do I want to be a touring musician? At that point, it was punk rock. So we were in vans, sleeping on floors, sleeping on the floor of your van, all that jazz. Yep. Mm-hmm. And so in the summer that I moved back from Corvallis to my hometown of Spokane at the time, I was like, maybe I don't want to be a musician anymore. Maybe that's what a high schooler wants to do, whatever. And so I had a summer job at this place called Arborcrest, because I literally just went, it wasn't on Craigslist, but it was some website where they were doing local ads, and this winery called Arborcrest in Spokane was doing like their summer concert series. They needed workers to pour wine. Okay. And so I was like, at that point I liked wine. I've never really been a big liquor guy. I kind of like beer, but wine was always at the dinner table growing up, and so I just always liked wine, and I never got in trouble with wine. So I was like, okay, I can go have a not troublesome summer job at working at a winery, and I'll be classy. Maybe I'll meet, some cool people, because there was a bunch of young people working there, and it was a hip winery, I guess you would say. I started working there for the summer, and then while I was still going to school in the fall, they offered me a job to help them with harvesting, which is like when the grapes come in, you actually crush them, make it into juice, ferment that into wine. Mm-hmm. And I seriously just fell in love with it. So I just started working there full time for about 1.5 years. And then that's when I was like, okay, I'm a young guy. I hate how certain people, older people, use wine as a way to make other people feel stupid. Right. And I loved the fact that, I'm not sure if you were, can relate. I would assume you do, because you're a go-getter. Like when you become interested in something, I just become obsessed with it, knowledge-wise.
100%.
And so I just became the dude that knew everything about wine. And so they gave me a lot more shifts. Even when I wasn't working at the actual facility making the wine, they'd want me to work at the tasting room a lot because they were like, dude, this kid just is a geek about wine.
Right.
And one of my favorite things was to get like the guys to come in that they, I only drink Coors Light because, all wine tastes the same. And those were the dudes that I would just beeline to and be like, all right, well, here's like, taste these two. These taste different, blah, blah, blah. And then they'd walk out being like, that guy didn't make me feel stupid.
Yeah.
They do taste different. This is great. And so I was like, oh, I want to be this young, cool guy with tattoos in the industry that makes wine approachable to people. And I just had this, that was my MO going in. So I was going to go to school. I was going to be this like ex-musician meets winemaker guy that would have this hip, cool winery. And then my career ruined all that. So,
and then my career, yeah.
in the best possible way.
Yes. I was going to say, so like, I mean, how did you get, okay, so my interaction with Mike, so like, again, I was a huge, I'm sure he knows this by now. When I was growing up, like, again, the faster the band, the better. Just as far as punk rock goes, like they were way faster than NoFX or Pennywise or any of the bands that played like the really fast punk beats. I discovered MXPX on like I think it was the show 120 Minutes, and it was the song Chick Magnet. And so then I just kept like following them from that, and then like the first time I ever saw them was they put like Warped Tour like 98 or something, and then they're like, we're coming back with Blink 182, and so then I saw like Blink 182 and like them and Homegrown. I don't know if you remember that band. And then again, just like all these shows I would go to, just like open my eyes and ears to like just everything else in that era. And so I ended up touring with MXPX in 2002. So I graduated high school. That's the year I graduated. And so I went straight on to Warped Tour because there was this like all-girl punk rock band called the Eyeliners. And they wanted me to be like the hired guy. And the drummer, Laura, she would play drums and sing at the same time. But I guess like it wasn't translating live for them. So they wanted to move her to the front and then just have like a touring drummer. And so I was that guy. And they knew me because I was like, we were basically like the token support band for like every punk rock band that would come through Salt Lake City. I was in a band called the Teen Tragedies. And so we would literally open up for everybody. We'd open up for like Tsunami Bomb or AFI or Mr. T Experience, Amberetta or American Steel. I don't know if I'm naming off bands that no one's ever heard of, but it was like the Lookout Records age for music. And this is like, late 90s, early 2000s when I was doing this. I remember emailing the Eyeliners. We went on like some like DIY, self-book tour, Teen Tragedies, and so the Eyeliners came to watch us in like New Mexico, where they're from, at like the launch pad. And I remember and we booked this stuff ourselves. There was this website we used to use called bookyourownfuckinglife.org. I don't know if have you ever had to use that growing up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. See, those are the questions I want to ask you too. It's just like, when you're in a band, it's like, so for me, it's like, it's not just like, well, I just got into a band and, the rest is history. And like, I've literally have had to learn how to do everything from like zero. Like, how do I book a show? How do I get to, go on tour? How do I get to market the
Make
tour?
a flyer graphically. Yeah. I don't know how to, everything.
Right. Yeah. So this is all stuff I was like learning how to do. And so then like, I remember after this like tour at the Teen Tragedies at the time, like we're all friends now, but I remember at the time we were just like, man, we really hate each other. This sucks, And so like I quit the band. And I emailed the Eyeliners, and email was just kind of a new thing, within like a couple years of me doing this. So I emailed them saying like, hey, like, thanks for coming out to our show in New Mexico. Anytime you guys come back to Salt Lake, let's hang out. Maybe we can go grab like pizza again at this place called The Pie in Salt Lake City. It still exists.
Oh, yeah.
You been to The Pie?
Where you walk down the stairs and it's like the huge, we always had the big one. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, dude. So that was like a staple for us. Like we'd always go to The Pie after the shows. So I was like, hey, next time you come, maybe we can go to The Pie or whatever. And so Jell was the guitar player, and she wrote me back and was like, hey, well, we're trying to move our sister Laura up to the front. Maybe you want to come and try out and play drums. Like we did this like rotating drummer chair. And so I knew going into it that I wasn't going to be like their full-time guy. They just wanted to use like a bunch of different people, like their friends. And I think I was up against Hunter from AFI. So he plays bass for AFI, but sometimes he's a drummer. So I was up against, I think I was up against him, and then they just took me out. And so I tried out. I flew down to New Mexico, and our show was with Lisa Loeb. That was like my first like introduction to the band. And so we opened up for Lisa Loeb, and then they're like, hey, do you want to do the next tour with us? We're going on the Warped Tour. And I was like, what? Like you guys are going on a Warped Tour? And then like they got a tour bus, and we were sharing with Flogging Molly. And this is like 5 days after I graduated.
Oh my God, dude.
This is like 5 days after I graduated high school. So this would have been my, so at 18, this would have been my fourth tour I ever did. because I did like, because I toured while I was in high school. I'd have to get like permission slips and like all sorts of weird hoops and whatever. But yeah, at that age, I went out with the eyeliners, and then I met Mike Herrera that summer. Sorry, this all comes back to Mike Herrera. So I met him that summer, but he and I just like, he gave me like his email number and all that stuff, but I don't think like he and I became like close until maybe like 7 years later or something like that. Like I just kept like, we just kept like talking to each other a little bit here and there. But then he like invite me to come to his studio, and he'd invite me to come do his podcast, and he'd invite me to like come record songs with him. And he's just like the coolest guy ever. He's so down to earth, and there's nobody like him. And I just, they say don't meet your heroes or whatever, but he's been like a really rad, influential guy in my life as well. We also recorded a couple songs.
Insane bass player too.
No, for sure. He rips.
He definitely has a few, like he showcased a little more in Goldfinger, but dude, I just would see him riff, and I'm like, dude, I had no idea how good you were. And speaking of Chick Magnet, that was the first song I ever learned on bass. I thought I was the coolest guy in jazz band.
Yeah, I play bass too. So like that, yeah. So I'm not just the drummer. In fact, my band teacher at the time told me that when I was in high school, he didn't want me playing drums in the jazz band. He wanted me playing bass. So I played bass in our jazz band, and then like for pep band or like concert band, then I was in like the the rhythm section, the percussion section. Fucking crazy, man.
Dude.
Okay, so take me from when you were in Spokane or like near Spokane, Washington. I mean, like, how did you get out and like play show? Like, how did you like start a band? Like, how did you like get the word out? Because there's a lot of people that listen to this show that are trying to figure out how to do what you and I do, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did you do that when you're in high school? Like, how did you meet people? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how did you make the leap? Like, you're like, I'm going to move to Seattle. Because like, I guess the next biggest town for music to happen, like in your, area would be Seattle, I guess. Even though like, it's got to be hard to like, even just, it's hard to start bands anywhere. And it depends on like the climate of just whatever's happening at the time too. And like whatever kind of music is popping up or whatever like genre you want to be a part of. So, I mean, like, how did that work for you?
Well, in high school, we were the kids that were in the band. The band was If You're Lucky. So I think we even played we played at like an assembly or two. It was insane. And like on the last day of school when people were leaving early or whatever, we'd like played in the cafeteria. So we were like hustlers, and we were like passing out our CDs.
Okay.
When we graduated and went to Spokane. So I was basically in one main band in Spokane, but I mean, we had to do all the pay for play stuff as well. So we would that was really at the advent of MySpace. So we were really trying to figure out that new whole, how the West was one kind of vibe of that. But I forget the guy's last name, but we really befriended the main dude who booked almost all the venues. His name was Ryan. And we just basically.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Did he work at like a print shop? Did he work at like a Xerox kind of a place? Because there was this guy that put on all the shows in Spokane.
I think he might have been, yeah.
Then I know exactly who you're talking about. Because he booked all the shows. He was like the guy.
He did.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Dude, this is insane how small the world is. Okay.
So yeah, we would just go to house parties all the time at his place, and like whether you're drinking or not, you would just meet everyone in the scene, and so you would share shows. I mean, we would saturate the market. Nowadays, we're always talking about like, every band I'm in, radius clauses, and blah blah blah. We were just like, no, we're gonna play 15,000 shows every weekend, and it would just like get our name in people's mouths, or like they couldn't walk by a venue without seeing our band's name on it. Business model 101, the exact opposite of what you should do. But that's, I mean, like we would, cut things out, make graphics for our flyers. I don't know how specific you want me to go, but it's just like we would do everything so DIY. We would use Cakewalk. And well, I will say the bassist in our band, his parents had just recently got a divorce. And so we were reaping the benefits as a band, because they would just be like, well, here's an amp. Well, here's a full PA. Oh, here's a mixer system. Here's a full thing of microphones to like win over his love.
Sure.
And so we were just like, I don't know. I think, we had a pretty nice little setup for a while just to, I will say this. So in our hometown of Chewelah, there was this place called the Chewelah Casino, and they had this old decrepit outdoor amphitheater basically that was like 3 slabs of concrete with like wooden poles you could maybe hang lights on, but it was like so bare bones. And I think they had meant to make it into something bigger, but they had just let it over, like the grass was basically to my shoulders. And we had approached them because Chewelah every summer has this thing called Oh my gosh. It's Chautauqua. It's called Chautauqua.
Okay.
And, 10, 15,000 people come through that town on just that weekend. And they're always looking for things to do at night. So we're like, well, let's actually just put on, we had since graduated, we were living in Spokane. We're like, let's go back to Chewelah and let's put on this DIY show. Let's approach the casino. We're going to offer them, we'll pay you $100. We'll mow the entire amphitheater. My dad brought his tractor in. We basically made this thing immaculate. And then we rented a van and we became a float in the parade that day. And we just like drove behind I don't know, the Miss Chewelah pageant float. We had like speakers and we were like, hey, what's up? This is our band. Come to the show tonight. And we were just one of the key things in the parade. And then we put on a show. I think like 300 or 400 kids came out that didn't know us, and it was a success.
That's great.
But it was just, we would just made our own everything.
Right.
Hired a sound guy, built it from scratch. We had to like source the power from the casino and run it like 400 yards to the amphitheater. It was insane, dude.
You
something I would never do nowadays. Now I'm like, what's the catering budget? Where's my bottle of wine?
Right. Yeah. Okay, so from there, what made you decide okay, so you'd done everything that you could do in your local town, but what gave you the courage to just go, hey, you know what? I'm going to move to Seattle now. I'm going to try to do this out there. I know there was school was a little bit involved, but what was the thing that brought you there?
Well, so yeah, it actually was wine school.
Yeah.
And so I was getting out of Spokane, but then the mic thing happened and I decided to stop going to school, and I wasn't putting all my eggs in the Mike basket because Mike has his own career.
Sure.
And it wasn't like we were starting a band together. So I was like, okay, I still have to play with people. And so, Seattle was just the way to go. I didn't know if me and a girlfriend I had moved over to Seattle with had broken up. So I didn't have to stay in Seattle, but I just really fell in love with that scene. Ultimately, I decided to move to LA because Seattle...
It only had so much to offer, or what? It was just like
that. Yeah. And I don't want to granted, I moved to, LA in 2016. So I can't talk about the Seattle music scene as it is now. So have that be a little disclaimer. But I felt that in a lot of ways, talking about commerce and being in a band at the same time up in Seattle was kind of this negative thing. Okay. And we were like, well, we want to make a career out of it. So being in LA, if someone calls me up and it's like, hey, I want you to play a show, it's not weird for me to be like, awesome. What's the budget? What are we, what are we talking about? But in Seattle, it felt like that was something that was like, you know what, man, we're going to go with someone else that cares about the music first. And I'm like, I do, but I also have to pay my bills. But yeah, Seattle is a really cool scene, and there's nothing off limits, I guess. I know a lot of people associate it with grunge music, but it's really a lot more than that. I love the Seattle music scene from an artist's perspective. For the venues that are still around, because a lot of them are not there anymore, even in the 4 years or 5 years, probably almost 6 years since I've been in LA. So not sure if that answered your question, but
yeah, no, I was going to say some of the underground spots that I would play in Seattle were I wouldn't even call it really underground, but the places I was able to go, even as a DIY band, was it used to be called Graceland back in the day, but now it's called El Corazon,
Yep, and it was like the exit, the off-ramp, before it was called Graceland,
Yeah, so I knew it as Graceland because I remember going up there and seeing a couple shows when I was in high school, because one of my best friends at the time, his mom lived up there, so we went up there for spring break. We also planned a little tour around. I had this band that I did where I was trying. I won't ever talk about it, but I was singing and playing drums, and we did
I want you to talk about it.
Nope. And so we did. Well, I mean, I'll tell you the story, but I won't tell you the band name. I won't tell you any of that crap. But it was 5 shows, and we planned a trip up to Seattle, kind of to go see his mom. But we booked shows along the way from Utah to up there, and then at the time, this guy Will, who was in the band Aiden. I don't know if you remember that band or not.
Oh yeah.
But Aiden, Will had this other band called Youth at Risk. Dude, he and I go so far back, only because, back in the day when I was in that band, I was telling you about the Teen Tragedies. He was doing merch for the band Zeke. Do you remember Zeke? They're this
sounds familiar. Yeah, I think that was on a compilation that I had too.
Yeah. So they're this thrash metal punk band or whatever on Epitaph, and I remember we got asked to open up for them in Idaho. So we drove up to Idaho. Teen Tragedies did, and I met Will, and Will gave me a CD, and we ended up trading shows and stuff. And so we kept in contact through email, and then we lost touch, and then we both came to find out we both are in gothic horror bands, back in 2004 to 2000, that era, 2005, 2006, whatever. But I just remember going up to Seattle playing like, El Corazon when it was still called Graceland. And then trying to think of where else I played, like Chop Suey was up there.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Trying
yeah,
to
the
think of some
Crocodile
other-
maybe.
Definitely I played the Crocodile with IDK Howe.
Oh, okay.
And then as things started to progress more, then we play like a sold out show at like not I'm talking about like much later in my career, like I Am Ghost. And then we'd like play like sold out shows at like Graceland or sorry El Corazon, and then we play like Soto, and then we play
Showbox,
Market Show, and then we play like Numos, and we play just all the things, man, up there.
Yeah, I love Seattle, man. I still
Seattle's super cool, but it seems like it'd be a really hard scene to make something happen because there's only like so many venues, right? There's only so many venues for bands to play, right? I mean,
it was so I joined after I had kind of stopped working with Mike. There was a band called Ever So Android. They had already put out 2 records, and so by the time I joined them, they were already at kind of like a sold out Chop Suey level when they would put on shows. Before we moved down to LA, we actually had a record release show at Numos that was sold out. So they were doing pretty well. And so
how did you get the word out like around there with them? Was it just because they were a band for so long and it's just like name repetition, or was it like,
I'm trying to think what Drew did. I mean, Drew Murray is one of my closest friends. I love him. While he claims he's not a big talker, he can, and I don't mean this in a bad way, he can schmooze anyone. It's like you just automatically feel like you're his best friend. And so everyone loved the band because they would go to shows 8 nights a week if they could. They were always out and they were always hustling their band. And I had so much respect to this day. Even when they moved to LA, Hope, the singer of the band, worked at Stories in Echo Park, if you know that spot.
Okay.
And so even within 6 months of them moving there, they weren't strategic about it, but they just loved being a part of the scene and just feeling like a part of it, kind of like how I describe you. And so they just genuinely were friends with everyone. And so they would go to everyone's show. And so it's kind of like a barter system. Like, I'm always there to support you. Just come out to support me. I think that's what a lot of the music scene in Seattle was everyone would go to each other's shows. And even if you didn't want to go out, you're like, yeah, but they came to my show last month and I got to be there for them.
Totally. I mean, what I find in LA is that there is a community, but it's a community based on the people that want to be in that community, I guess, if that makes any sense. Like, because I feel like 100%. Everybody kind of knows everybody, but to what degree? So, I mean, like, if you go to a show, it's like, I mean, I can probably, I shit you not. I mean, I've been out here almost like 20 years now. I can go to literally almost any show, whether it's a punk show or an indie show or like, big show at the Forum or a small show. I will probably know at least one person there. Like, it's just, but it's, I feel like in LA too, it's like if the more people that you know, it doesn't necessarily, it just means your chances are better at doing the things that you want to do. Like when we got this band started, I got to be honest. I mean, like with my last group and then, Dallon's last group, it was like, it just wasn't like fulfilling anymore, I guess. And so, we just kind of, it's just like, he wrote some songs and I was just out and I was like talking to some people and we made like a website where people could just like go listen to music. But it's just like, if I hadn't have like put in that kind of, cause like, dude, you can have like the best songs in the world, but if there's not like a cheerleader behind you, then it might not go anywhere. You could literally be Mozart. And if people don't know about Mozart, then like Mozart probably isn't going to go anywhere. That band, the Brobecks, I mean, dude, we literally played for like nobody all the time. And it was like just word of mouth. And it was just people wanted to either come or they didn't. It's just basically that's what I feel like that's how music is even made in LA. It's just like, or if you're looking for like a drum gig or you're looking for whatever, it's just word of mouth. And if you could do the skill. But what I was going to say was when we were starting this band, it's like we made like a little website and I would just tell like people that I trusted in music. And usually like I would tell them and then maybe you would hear something back or maybe you wouldn't. And then with this band, it was like instantaneously like, hey, I really love this. Like, maybe let's take a meeting. And it was like, holy shit, like everything's kind of happening so fast. Because I mean, the art definitely spoke for itself, but there's some people that might just not even listen to it. There might be some people that do listen to it, but then they don't like it. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's so hard being a drummer because I mean, and I swear to God, Ben, I don't know how I've been able to do it this long. Just like it's been just like my career has been like one thing to the next, and it's just always like it's always progressed for me. So I don't know if it's like that for
I've loved watching your career, man, because I've followed you. Mike turned me on to you. I mean, he loves you as a drummer and obviously loves you. And so you got brought up a few times. And so I've been following your career for the last 5-6 years probably. Damn. And no, man, I totally understand why you've had a career as long as you have. I mean, from an outside perspective, it's very obvious. You're a great player and an awesome dude.
Well,
so.
you were also been a fantastic player. I've been keeping up with you. You know, I got to see you for the first time when Cannons played at the El Rey. I went with my friend Megan
Yes.
Holiday to the show. I don't know if you know her.
Love Megan. Oh yeah.
So
Megan's great.
Megan has been a huge she's been a huge staple in my life. She was the one I don't really talk about this all that much, but she was the one that got me to stop drinking. And so I was going to say too is what people forget sometimes is that like in music sometimes you need something to like bond over, you know. And so like mine would be going out and drinking with like, you know, managers or fucking artists or whatever, and we would just get like fucking smashed. But then somehow that would turn into like a job opportunity. Not that I was even like looking for that, you know. It would be like, oh, like I'm thinking of Ryan because he was at the right place at the right time or whatever it was. And it's just like I think if you're at the right place at the right time and you work really hard and you have a good attitude, I think anything is possible for anybody, you know.
Well, I was gonna say because like I don't smoke cigarettes, but going back to Drew, and I think he has actually cut back quite a bit. But
right.
I wished I smoked so many times because up in Seattle, if you have a cigarette in your hand, I'm not condoning cigarettes as I want this to be a thing, but you can just talk to anyone. It's like this thing. And I'm like, man, I wish I smoked just because that's how he met so many people is in the back of the club. That's how, honestly, I would say the band at the time's name, Ever So Android, got so many gigs because he would just end up shooting the shit with people. And then they're like, oh, by the way, I own the Crocodile. You're a great, I love you, man. Well, guys, you know, so it's that thing that just basically echoing exactly what you said, but in a less formulated way. So I agree with you is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I just mean like when you moved out to LA in 2016, I mean, how long do you think you were out here before things really like started picking up for you in your career? Because I was out here because like when I first moved out to LA, I would say, well, I moved out here in 2003 and then I joined the band like the first day I moved out here, not even like trying to do. I was like trying. I really liked the band. They were called Fairview. And they were like on Militia Group and like they had done like a bunch of cool shit already, you know? They were like they did like Coachella and they played like the Mars Volta's first show and they toured with like Nerf Herder and they did like I don't know, they just did all they had like the management that like the guy that was like the general manager at the El Rey at the time who eventually became like I think like vice president of like operations over at Golden Voice, you know? So like a lot of cool things were happening for this band. And so I tried out day one. And then when I got there, I went to, so I was like, okay, I guess I'm in this band, but I also moved to LA to go to a music school after I had like was drumming for the Eyeliners for like a couple tours, right? So I moved to LA in 2003, went to the LA Music Academy. Within 3 months, I was like, okay, I need to drop out because A, it's like super expensive, and B, I think I've already got the hang of like what this is supposed to be. But behind the scenes, it was like what I then realized much later on is that the band I was in, it seemed like the singer at the time was like trying to chase after this much bigger, unattainable thing that's still like kind of actually unattainable. Now he's like married and has kids and all that stuff, but like I think he was his family was like was well off, you know, so. You know, he didn't have to do the same things like you and I would have to do. So like I had a job that like I absolutely fucking hated. You know, I was doing like telemarketing for like Allstate Insurance, and I hated that job with a passion. And then like I was working like a film vault in Hollywood, but I was traveling up from Orange County because that's where the band lived, and like I was really dedicated. But I mean, gas was like so much cheaper back then. It was like maybe like $1 or something, you know, $1 a gallon. So I was able to make that drive. But I remember I was hustling so hard, and then I realized like 2.5 years into the band that like these people didn't want the same things that I wanted. So being out here, but I met so many people because I would just go to shows all the time. And I talked to them about the band I was in. I would give them like demos. People would like the demos, but then the band never wanted to like work, you know? I mean, we were able to like showcase for like a ton of different labels, and we were working with like all sorts of crazy producers and getting offered like crazy production deals that were either like good or shitty. And, you know, it just, we never like got to take any of it. I'm just like, you know what am I doing here? So I tried to find like-minded people that wanted to do the same things I wanted to do. But I was going to say so it took me about maybe like being in LA and just being around and just moving out here. It probably took me like 2.5 years to like really make shit going for myself. You know, what was it like for you? Because you said you joined Eve 6, what was it, 2018 you said?
Yeah, very early 2018.
Yes. Okay, so you put your time in as well, just being out here and just being a drummer and like doing the things that a drummer has to do. And it was, I got to say, like being 19, it was really hard though, because I'd probably get like maybe like 5 hours of sleep a night and then just do the exact same things over and over again. Like I go to work and then I go to practice and then I go to a show and then I meet up with somebody and get their number and then we'd hang out and then it'd be, you know, just the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say my timeline is maybe a little bit less than yours, but again, it's just circumstantial.
Right.
I probably met that session where Kenny, and me got along, asked me to be in
Right.
fitness, was probably just over 2 years. And then I joined then I joined Eve 6 a year after that. So it was probably about, and even in that first year of being in fitness, they weren't super busy. I think we did one US tour, but I was still playing with like 5 or 6 other projects and still supplementing by still working at a restaurant.
Yeah.
But luckily, I've been doing music full time for about 4 years now. But yeah, it took about 2 years in LA for that to really
And you were probably just
stick.
nailing it hard. I don't know about you, but I was going hard to the grind. Like it was to the point even where like our band would like separate and be like, okay, let's get a flyer and like let's figure out what shows are coming to town. And we'd stand out front and we just hand out the flyers or CDRs or like whatever the fuck, back in like 2005, I think, when bands were able to do that.
100%, dude.
So-
And I would say yes to every gig.
Right. That's the trick too. I remember Josh Freeze. He made some quote. He's like, say yes to everything.
Yeah.
Just say yes to
Well, and
everything.
like even just now, 2 of my close friends, one of them plays Billy Howardell.
Wow.
I met at some random gig. Maybe it's Elliot Durango.
I know Elliot. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Good
So
guy.
he just got off tour. He used to play with Dorothy for a while, and then maybe Liv Slingerland. She plays with Halsey now.
Okay.
Those 2 people, we both said yes to these random gigs. Played in front of like 7 people.
Yeah.
But now they're close friends, and we've never been able to play together again. But like in LA, if you're around, kind of like what you were saying earlier, people that are too stupid not to quit, if that was
Yeah.
the phrase you said.
Yep.
If you just maintain these friendships, as long as you surround yourself with people that you have respect for, that are good at their instrument, that have the drive, they're probably going to get up there too. And then you can kind of grow together. And then you have these friends that are just doing these amazing things that you can support each other. And so at the beginning, me saying yes to all these random Craigslist ads saying like, need a drummer for this date.
Yeah.
And me saying yes to an $85 gig with a free rehearsal, and like a not paid rehearsal.
Right.
Those are now people that I consider really close friends, and so
Totally. Yeah, I think I've only said no maybe to like just like a handful in my entire life. Even like playing with like Dallin. I mean, like, dude, playing in Brobex, we never got paid anything. And like, and when I was playing with him, I was also playing with like a couple bigger bands that like actually paid me. And he was like, well, I can't, because Brobex was really, it was his band, but he brought me in because like when you're making nothing and you split nothing 4 ways, what is that? That's still nothing. So no skin off of anybody's back, So yeah, I was like an equal part of that. And it was just like, he saw how hard I worked, and I think he just remembered all those good times, and that's why he asked me to be a part of this thing. And so he was the artistic one. I was the one that was good at talking to people, I guess. If you were to give people advice just on like doing what you're doing right now, like how to get there, like what do you think you would tell somebody that was just wanting to do what like we do?
Yeah, I ask myself that every day. Like, what would I tell myself? Yeah, I mean, you just got to really actually love it, because, and I'm not one of those things. I actually think it's very bad advice. And I would kind of say it's harmful for people to say, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Going in with that mindset, and then if you find yourself in any adversity, you're like, but I thought this was supposed to be only enjoyable because I love this. My work and your work is very hard sometimes. It's very stressful, but I love it so much that even if it was 90% stressful, it's still, all of it's enjoyable. I find something to grab out of it. And so I'll say this, it's all about perspective and keeping going, because I really messed up my back about a week ago on tour. And it's because I have such piss poor posture, and I've been telling myself I need to switch it up for years. And so the last few shows, I've had to basically sit with and I am kind of getting to my point, I promise. Okay. But I've had to almost sit with like a stick up my ass while I'm playing, so my back doesn't hurt because I pulled a muscle. And I was playing so much better. And it was like amazing. I was like, oh, I'm hitting better because my shoulders are back. My body is just ergonomically working better. And immediately when something was really shitty and I was in my bunk in throbbing pain, I was like, but I love this. How can I make this a positive thing? And so even if it's sucky sometimes, you have to force yourself to be like, I love this. This is why I'm here. This sucks, but it's also amazing all at the same time. And so it really is, dude, you just gotta, I would tell someone to just, if something crappy is going wrong, you're obviously not going to quit because you love it. I mean, if you're even thinking about quitting, then that's a different kind of person I'm talking to. I guess I'm talking to someone who's like, I have to do this. How can I make it to that next level?
Right.
You just have to convince yourself what is amazing about this when everything else is saying that this sucks right now. And then you realize your life's amazing.
Do you tend to hunch over when you play? Like, do you sit low and you like hunch, or
dude, yeah. If you go to any of my Instagram, I'm just like, you can't see it, but it's like I'm
Sure.
and I've been to Dave Elich, and I love Dave Elich. I think he's amazing in so many ways.
I saw your posts and stories about that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's great. And do I acknowledge that what he's saying is true and correct? Yes. Do I do it? 99% of the time, no, because I'm trying to look cool on stage. It's like,
yeah,
you got to look cool.
You got to have swagger. Yeah.
Exactly. But so I guess my advice for people like to make it is it is a game of perspective. That's 100% what it is. Because if you don't convince yourself that there's something amazing about every situation, because we do have the best job in the world, everything else kind of, there's a tributary of shitty things that happens if you have a shitty perspective. I still grapple with that all the time, obviously, but just the most recent back thing was like, oh, that is what I tend to do as my fail-safe, is to find something good about this career that everyone wishes they could do what we do. Right. I guarantee.
Yeah, so. I definitely have my days, man. I'll be like, man, what the fuck? Like, what's happening? Then I think I'm like, oh, you know what? The worst day on tour is better than the best day at an office job. That's what I have to
100%.
remember. You know what I mean? Even if it's the worst. And it's just like so many of the problems that could happen or that like arise are so stupid, because I feel like music is, you don't ever really, I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but like, I've been doing this now like professionally for like 21 years, And so, but a lot of people that are in music, they don't actually like grow up. Like you're just in this everlasting like neverland that you could literally, like right now you could be doing whatever you want in Greensboro, North Carolina. That's where you are.
Yep.
Yeah. You could literally be doing, you can get trashed right now if you wanted to. You could be laying down and reading a book. You could be doing a podcast with your friend Ryan Seaman. You could do whatever the fuck you want to when you're on tour. And it's like, I was just gonna say that like, I think that 90% of music is like bullshit, and then the 10% of it that's really great is when we get to go play, and that's the time I enjoy more than anything else.
Yep, that's what I heard someone say. The way they view being paid on the road is they do the show for free. You're paying me to be on the road,
right? Yeah,
so like yeah. But I will say one thing too, to be a little more of a tactical thing, is to create your own opportunities. So I work for Big Fat Snare Drum, and
which I need to talk to you more about that. I need to talk to you more about that when we're done, because I need. Yeah,
I totally bypassed all that. I apologize, but I do work for Big Fat. I know Chris, but like, so I have a podcast as well, and it's not about who you know; it's about who knows you. To kind of go back to what you were talking about with drummers, and I created this podcast to get more drummers to know who I am, to get in contact with drummers that I look up to. I created an opportunity for myself to be put in a situation where I'm having hour-plus long conversations with Ash Sohn, Jojo Mayer, Daru Jones, James Gadsden, the best drummers arguably the best drummers in the world.
Yeah.
And I get paid to do it because I've created this opportunity, instead of just like hoping someone figures out who I am or paying someone to take an hour of their time, give them a platform to say what they want to say, and then you get to hang out with them.
Right.
It's just, you have to create your own opportunities. You're not going to, it never happens for you. And there's a few people that you can post a video and then, you get asked to join a band, but like, you have to really make opportunities and just follow through with them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I can't just be a drummer,
Yeah.
That's why I have I mean, it's not like solely why I have the show. I mean, I have the show so I get to know like the people that are in my life just a little better, And now I know so much more about you than I ever knew before. if I'm being honest, I'm sure.
Ditto, man.
I'm sure the same way for you. Well, okay, so we have about like 2 minutes left on the show. What's the best way for people to find you and check you out?
Yeah, so real quick, I do have a podcast that I do for Big Fat Snare Drum. It's not to promote the company, but I do it for them. It's called Big Fat 5. I bring on amazing drummers like you and dissect the 5 records that shaped who they are as players. But yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, it's at Ben Hilsinger, and I'm sure my name is spelled in the title of this episode, but just at Ben Hilsinger. I'm not sure when this is going out, but Cannons is on the road all the time. Eve 6 is playing all the time. Hit me up there. I'm not really on TikTok or Twitter, but Instagram at Ben Hilsinger.
That's
And there
that's
you go.
amazing. I feel like I need to start doing TikTok. I have 2 TikToks up there right now. I did like a gear breakdown, but the guy that was out with us, he just like kind of made the video for me and like edited it. And so now I'm like, oh man, if he did such a great job at this, I need to like step up my game and
Yeah.
figure out how to really use the platform more. I don't know, man. I just like the older you get, the harder things get sometimes,
Yeah. I'm not really on TikTok. I have enough vices. I don't
Right.
need to be scrolling on one more social
Sure.
media network.
Yeah, I just want, because you know what, with music, it's like adapt or die. That's what it is.
Mhm.
So you have to just learn how to do all the platforms. So, okay, well, Ben, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate it, because I know being on the road, it's really hard to find free time to go do things sometimes, We'll have to hang when you get back in LA, man.
Dude,
Yeah.
hell yeah, man.
So, all right, well, hey, coming up next, we have Gone Fishkin here on Adobe Radio, and you can tune into my show, Ryan Seaman and Friends, every single Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. And Ben, thanks again for being on the show. Make sure to go check out Eve 6 and Cannons, and that's all the time we have for today. So I'll see you next week here on Ryan Seaman and Friends and Adobe Radio.
And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using Isotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye.